Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Z-CarCulture. My name is Tino.
And I'm Kudzi.
And today we've got another interesting episode for you today because we're going to be looking at some key game changers of the past and present. We're looking at cars that have spawned trends, have spawned generations of cars that we love, etc., etc. Each one is a game changer for a different reason, and we're going to be looking at a few of those today. And the first one, right off the bat, we're looking way back, as in way back.
Yeah, too far back for my liking. So first is the Model T.
Yeah, and I think it's a game changer in a big way because it did a lot, not just for the car industry, but for industry in general. I mean, they were the first to adopt the production line system, which is still being used today.
That's
And
true.
I mean, generally that car was made for the people. Like before, only the rich could buy cars.
Only elite people in society. I think that's where even the likes of Mercedes made their name, because only the elites could buy a Mercedes.
Exactly.
But then Ford came and democratized. That's a tongue twister for me. But yes, they did democratize cars in a general sense.
Yeah.
They did.
And then a famous quote by the Mr. Ford himself said that you can get the Model T in any color you want, so long as it's black. So, Kudzi, what do you think? Is a Ford Model T, in terms of as a game changer, did it change the game for the better or for the worse?
I think I would say it's for the better.
Yeah, I think that's
it's a bit obvious.
it's a bit obvious.
Yeah, it did good for the industry.
Definitely. On to the next one. Next, we've got the Willys Jeep. Now, this is a vehicle that was developed back in
I think in the 40s.
Yeah, in the 40s.
It was meant to be like a military vehicle for carrying the troops on the beach as they're going off into war.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably the predecessor to most of the trucks and SUVs that we have today. So you think of even the actual Wrangler itself, the Defenders, the Toyota Land Cruisers from the 70 series to the current, everything.
All can trace the heritage back to the Willys Jeep.
Exactly.
And that's why it's definitely a game changer. And it was pretty much one of those trucks that can't die.
Yeah,
that's what it was built for.
It's really rugged. Yeah, it was built for war.
So with this one, what is it? Has it changed the game for the better or for the worse?
I think it's all good. I think in the earlier years of cars, typically game changers were changing it for the better.
For the better, but I think the more we get into the list, it's gonna be a bit
you start to cringe as you go up the list. But yes, this one's definitely for the better. So number 3 on the list is the VW Golf. To be specific, the GTI, Mark 1 GTI. And this one, we selected it particularly because it's the first hot hatch, and it set the trend for all the cars that came after it as it relates to performance. Yeah,
and even till this day, the Golf GTI is still like the benchmark for other competitors to base their cars on. So it's pretty much the perfect car if you want both performance and also everyday usability. And definitely as a game changer, I mean, that's a recipe that we, especially here in Zim, we actually appreciate. To have a car that can do all those things and then some.
I'm actually looking for a car like that to be my first car right now. So that says a lot. For a car that was made in the 70s, that formula still holds true even now in this year and this generation. So it's definitely changed the game
for the better. Number 4 on the list, we've got the Lamborghini Countach. Now, this was the second model from Lamborghini. At the time, those two were very new. And this one set the trend when it comes to like just how a supercar should be. Ridiculous. You know, the complete opposite of the VW Golf we just mentioned, because it's not comfortable, it's not practical, but it looks wow. And if you're there back when it was still new, I mean, that was like an alien ship on wheels back then.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to plan your life around the car. Like you'd have to make so many compromises just to have it, just to drive it. But then when you saw one in public, or when you brought, if you're fortunate enough to own a Countach and you drove it out into the public, people were just amazed. Like, that's what people generally think to be a supercar, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this one did introduce us to a new type of vehicle, much like all the other entrants we've done so far. So it introduced supercars.
So is it a game changer in a good way? I mean, yes, it introduced supercars, but it also spawned a new type of buyer, the guy that prefers to look good and nothing else, the poser.
Well, I think very slightly it misses changing the game for the worse, so it's still good.
It's smack bang in the middle on this
Yeah,
one.
it's cutting it close.
Yeah, definitely.
Alright, so we're number what now?
Number 5.
Number 5 is the Lexus LS400. And this one is here because it's the first car that actually got, on the first go, they got it, they nailed it.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a cheap, approachable luxury car for the most part.
It is. I mean, it's hard to even find a lot of people that have bad things to say about it, because even as old as it is now, it's still held as a car that pretty much ticks all the right boxes, especially if you're looking for cheap luxury, which kind of doesn't make sense when you hear it out loud, but that's exactly what it was. I mean, it had an engine so smooth that one of the ads, I think their main ad actually, they put like a tower of champagne glasses on the engine whilst it was running, and nothing happened.
Exactly.
That's how smooth it is. I mean, even if you buy one today and it's still in good condition, it's still pretty smooth.
You can still, you can run it for a very long time.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is. I mean, it spawned companies like Genesis that came later on, where you've got a variation of a brand like Toyota that is more luxury oriented, but provides that luxury at an affordable price. You don't have to go to Mercedes or anything like that. And even running the car long term.
Even Mercedes right now is kind of doing a Toyota Lexus thing where they have the main company being Mercedes, and then there's like Maybach or Maybach as they say it.
Yeah, so definitely I think it's a game changer for the better, because at least as broke as we are, we can also, have a taste of that good life.
Rich flex. So next up on the list is the Honda NSX, and I think this car is popular for just being the most reliable supercar. Coming in the early 90s, other manufacturers like the Ferraris, the Porsches, any other exotic car you could think of would always have compromises in terms of reliability and usability. So Honda had a bright idea, and they thought they could actually outdo these manufacturers. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, but then the whole point not the whole point, but then part of the charm of these other supercars was, they broke down and they weren't as reliable, but they just had that something. I mean, it was definitely an adventure to go out of the car not knowing if you're going to make it back or not. That's part of the charm. So with this NSX, I mean, it's now like way reliable, like compared to any other supercar of the time, yet it still backed it up in terms of performance. So didn't they in fact make a boring supercar?
Well, that's a very strong, valid argument, but I think I'll cut it some slack, because I know it's a bit of a handful. If you don't really know how to drive this thing, you'll spin out. So you really have to be talented to bring out the best in the NSX. It's not everyone. So I think in that regard, it's a bit, it's challenging. It's got something going on.
But I guess it was bound to happen too in that segment, to have a supercar that at least supposed to be somewhat reliable. I mean, modern supercars today are that to an extent. It was gonna happen anyways. The NSX, I guess, so happened to be there at the right place at the right time to do it. So in terms of being a game changer,
you have your reservations.
I have my reservations on this one. But I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt, because I'm sure it's still a fantastic thing to have.
Yay!
And so game changer in a good way. Let's give it that.
Alright.
Next, we've got a car that's not really exciting or fun or good looking, but it does one thing, and that's efficiency. That's the one thing it does really well, and that's the Toyota Prius. We're looking at the first generation in particular because that, of course, set the pace for the other ones to follow. And a whole sub-industry in the form of hybrids, which are now all the rage now in Zimbabwe. Yeah, I mean, Kudzi doesn't have anything to say about it because as much
I thought this is the most exciting car on the list. But no, the Prius did do wonders because initially there was a very hard resistance to overcome, but then over the years they kind of softened people up to the idea of hybrids. And now typically every car you see even in this city is a hybrid.
It's a hybrid. And
even if people don't give it the credit locally, you can still say that it was the first one to do it. So yeah.
And in a world now where, you know, a lot of people are now going electric, those that are still a little bit unsure or don't really want to go all the way in can, you know, go halfway and get a Prius where you got best of both worlds, an electric motor and an engine. So yeah, as a game changer,
for the good, not the best.
Yeah, I mean,
it's right on the.
It's a logical, but in terms of emotions, no.
The soul is
dead. Doesn't exist. So it's in the middle. This one, I think. Right, next we have a car that, okay, spoiler alert, we're going to be discussing this for more time than we should, but it just goes to show how special this car really is, and that is the McLaren F1.
I mean, for years, people had lived with, I think people had a general idea of what a supercar was, but then the creator of the F1 had like tunnel vision. He had specific parameters he wanted his car to kind of fit in, and he did just that. He came with perfect vision and executed. The lightest car, most powerful, the most pure, like in air quotes, most pure sports car. And he did all of that.
And you sit in the middle when you're driving it. It just goes to show how much detail went into this to make sure that it's the perfect supercar. And in fact, it's not a supercar. I think it is a hypercar, one of the first ones. And I think that's the reason why we actually have it on this list, because it predates the Veyron, predates these other hypercars that are here now, because this was in the 90s, yet this car could reach, even surpass 250 miles per hour, which is 300 and what?
It's like 390. Close to 390 kilometers an hour.
And that's insane. I mean, and the noise it made, and the way it looked, and the people that bought it. Mr. Bean had one.
That's a noteworthy mention.
Had one. Then he crashed it, unfortunately. But this also goes to show that it's not really a car for the timid or for the untalented. You really have to, you know.
You really had to be on top of your game. I think it broke so many records for so many things, some of which we won't have time to dive into.
I think we'd have to make a separate episode for that, which we could. If you're interested in that, let us know in the comments. But yeah, as a game changer,
I mean, do we even have to ask?
Nah, we don't have to. I mean, it's obvious like the Model T. Yeah, we're just putting it in the same category. But yeah, it definitely is a game changer for the better.
Alright, so up next on this list is the Porsche Cayenne. For very obvious reasons, it's the first car from a non-traditional manufacturer to actually be a success in the SUV segment.
Yeah, I mean, they broke the mold because traditionally Porsche at the time was known for making sports cars, like the 911. That was like the halo car at the time, and still is. But they were the first to actually come up with a car that is the complete opposite in a way to the 911. I mean, this is a big,
huge break in character.
4-door SUV. Didn't look as good though.
It was heinous.
Good. No. But it also retained the luxury that was expected from that brand, but it was also powerful. I mean, with the Turbo S model, it was super fast. But But yeah, now we've got manufacturers like Lamborghini with the Urus coming out. We've got Ferrari now with the Purosangue. We've got the Aston Martin with the... What's the Aston Martin one?
DBX.
The DBX.
We have Maserati with the Levante. Alfa Romeo with the is it a Giulia?
No, it's a Stelvio.
Stelvio. It's the quad.
Everyone is doing it now, but it all started in the late 90s with the weird-looking 911 front end, but not really. It was just, but it was a true Porsche though, because it performed. I mean, it wasn't as wallowy as a traditional SUVs.
Well,
it actually was
but still, here's where I have my problem with it. I don't think it changed the game for the better. And I think this is the first car on this list that we have to blame for something.
Yeah, because although the car was made to save Porsche, because Porsche was really struggling at the time, it spawned a trend of having a car that, dare I say, is useless.
Pointless.
Yeah, pointless, because it's a car that is fast, yes, but you can't take it on a track. You can't race it against other more traditional sports cars and
even if it could go off-road or do all these other things that you expect of a traditional SUV, you could still... People didn't use them like that.
Exactly. And even if they wanted to, it's already compromised. It's a car that's... I mean, look at cars like the Urus, where it has like 23-inch wheels. Where are you going off-road with a car like that?
I mean, so it just spawned this entire lineup of not really
I think we just
useful cars. We're not grateful that we have the Urus, we have the Cullinan, we have... Some people are, but those people are not part of this show.
We'll tell you that much.
So, not for the better.
Yeah. So next we've got a car that is a legend. A living legend, even though, I think it's past its prime. We're talking about the Nissan R35 GTR. Now, of course, if you're a petrol head or you somewhat know of cars and you've been watching these on YouTube, you know what the GTR story is, starting, of course, with the earlier Godzilla models. But this is different because it did what a lot of the others couldn't, and that is to spank the behinds of Ferraris and McLarens and everyone else who thought they were fast, but nah.
At a very low price.
GTR was like, nah, we're faster. We're the fastest. And they were. Watch any drag race from around 08, 09 to about 2013, and every drag race that a GTR featured in, regardless of whether there was a 458 or anything like that.
Yeah, I think it simultaneously came up with the rise of YouTube, because most drag race videos involved a GTR. So it was always GTR versus everything else.
Yeah.
So it took on the fight to the bigger manufacturers, bringing it at a lower cost.
Yeah.
And introducing something new as well, like 4-wheel drive, dual clutch, that kind of ethos, which we now see more and more nowadays, but started with the GTR.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the story is not all fun and rosy. I mean, the GTR has just released an updated model in 2023, which is not a next generation. It's still the same one, but they just made improvements here and there. But we really want to dive deeper into that in another episode because, it's a bit of a mixed bag with that one. But it's definitely a game changer in a good way because it's sort of like an underdog story where you have a car that costs way less than the traditional supercar, but it's faster than that supercar. So it's definitely, and it was tunable, very tunable as well. So now it can make like 2,000 horsepower and really spank these Ferraris.
Now I have to play a bit of the devil's advocate because this car is not a car I particularly appreciate, but the model is, you have to give credit where it's due. It did change the game in terms of electric cars. It did come in with the range, so it addressed the typical problem of modern day electric cars.
And looks,
yeah,
look weird.
Looks are subjective.
No, but prior to that, electric cars that were being released looked weird.
Okay, I'll give you that.
But this looked more conventional. Okay, continue.
Okay, so it did change a lot. I mean, it's the first electric car that made a lot of people want one, and the fact that it's still being made today says a lot.
It does. Something. And I think it took a page out of GTR's book as well, because now you're finding a lot of drag races where the Model S featured, because as you know, with electric vehicles, when it comes to drag races, takeoff is where they really shine, because they just have instant torque and they're able to get off the line much quicker than a normal traditional internal combustion engine. So you find a lot of drag races now. We've got Tesla Model S versus Bugatti versus Ferrari versus all these other guys.
And they did do another thing where it's like they democratized power for the masses. Everyone can now pretty much drive 1,000 horsepower electric car, even if you're not that qualified, that skilled. You can still go in a showroom and order one.
However, there's now a different side to it now, the dark side, which has been well documented, as you know, of Tesla now having features that are questionable to have in our modern day. I mean, you've got so many people right now doing TikToks of sleeping behind the wheel because the self-driving
autonomy
feature that they're using, which doesn't 100% work. I mean, we've also seen videos of cars just crashing into trailers when they're that. You're laughing, people were getting hurt.
I'm sorry.
But yeah, there's that other side to it. And to be honest, I think it's a mixed bag with this one, because as much as it spawned the EV revolution,
I think this is the first car on this list where you have to like leave it in the middle, kinda, because it's really hard. For as much good as the car introduced, I feel like it did just as much bad.
Yeah.
So there's a yin and yang,
and depending on what day it is, it's either leaning on one side or the other.
Yes. So we just leave it there in the middle.
Right. The final cars, plural, because we've got 3 of them. They are, what are they? They're like special cars that came out pretty much at the same time in 2014, and they combined what Prius did, which is combine electric power and internal combustion power for efficiency, and they just said, you know what, forget efficiency, let's do speed, power, and all that fun stuff. So we're talking about the McLaren P1, LaFerrari, and the Porsche 918, aka
the Holy Trinity.
Blasphemy.
But I mean, you have a point where you compare it to the Prius, but the only difference is, instead of focusing on efficiency, they just thought, well, we can make this more exciting. And it hadn't been done before at all, because people just had this image of hybrids being the car that your uncle, your neighbor drives, something that just takes you from point A to B efficiently. But now you have cars that just combine the brutal savagery of internal combustion engines, the best of internal combustion engines, and electricity, and the results were just astonishing.
They were. I mean, I remember when they first came out, it was so hard to find all 3 of them in one video, because apparently it was so hard for people to actually get them all together, because each manufacturer didn't really want
not each. Porsche was fine.
Yeah.
Porsche was just like, they were game for everything. They're just like, okay. But then the huge tension was always between McLaren and Ferrari, where McLaren would always claim that, request that Ferrari provides a stock car, on the same tires. And
to the point where when we eventually got the video, courtesy of Chris Harris, we could tell the amount of
dancing around, and
it was a lot, because even when it came to tires, they had to make sure that all the tires are the same, and they had to check that, and they were just, Chris Harris actually showed us that, actually changing the tires, putting the right set, that's exactly the same with all the other 2. It was just
Ferrari was like, the McLaren cannot run in its lowest setting. That's cheating, and you cannot use the Trofeo or whatever tire was there.
It was wild.
So it was wild, but
it sparked a debate as well in terms of who did it best.
I still say it's the McLaren P1, but we have 3 people here, and that's why we have 3 cars on the same contending for the same
so if
spot.
I choose actually the 918, I'm sure Brian will choose the Ferrari, because of course he does. It's loud and red, and yeah, what's not to love about that? But yeah, I would go for the 918 because you've got all of this combined with all-wheel drive, so you've got immense level of grip wherever you are.
Save your love for the 918 for a different episode.
Yeah, I think we'll have to do a different thing for that. But yeah, I mean, that's it. So in terms of being game changers, yes, they did it for the better?
I think they did it for the better because I was losing hope because it seemed like the push for electricity was inevitable and internal combustion cars were just going to die. But then having this marriage between the two kind of made it a bit better for us, especially because at least there's hope. You can still have fun whilst you're saving the polar bears.
Yeah, to an extent, but now I think that formula has been taken to a whole nother level. I mean, now we've got the likes of SF90s that are making like what close to 1,000, if not more than 1,000 horsepower, and the way that it does it is just so quick. It's insane. But yeah, and they set the blueprints for that. And in terms of performance and in terms of saving the polar bears, the polar bears, where would we be without you? They have been saved to an extent, and yeah, so I guess it's for the better. And with that said, that marks the end of the episode. Thank you so much for watching. This was fun to make. And definitely let us know which are the game changers you think deserve to be on this list in the comments below. And don't forget to follow us on all our socials, Instagram, Facebook. We are there. If you want to engage and talk to us, we are there. We will respond. Believe me, we will. I've always been there, just waiting.
I have nothing to do but just wait for your comments.
Exactly. Please be kind as well. Z-CarCulture, we're out.